better when I'm getting to the bag, ayy. Got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast, ayy. Let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, ayy.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys, provide actual insight, stuff that you actually need in your day-to-day that you can apply, utilize, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I got a very special guest. I'm going to bring him up here in a second. And, I can only talk about current events so much. I like talking about how do we build businesses and how do we actually get things going, because things are going to happen, you guys. So much stuff happens outside of our control, and we got to find a way to win. But before we jump into that, you guys, you know what we got to do? It's called This Week in Freight, powered by my friends at DAT. You guys, we break down lanes on a lane-by-lane basis 3 times a week: dry van, reefer, flatbed. And I'm just teaching you guys how to read a market, because that's what I do every single day when I'm out there prospecting and actually moving freight, because, that's the difference between me and a lot of people who talk in this industry. I actually move freight. So with that being said, you guys, this week's lane is a dry van, and it is Columbia, South Carolina, going to Waco, Texas. And again, you guys, this is 100% viewer submitted. If you want your lane broken down on the show, email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. So as we know, you guys, the first thing I always pay attention to is the miles. This is 1,000 miles. So, Friday to Monday is going to be exponentially more expensive. Thursday to Monday, even more expensive, if that is your customer's requirement on that. But, furthermore, you guys, what we're seeing right now, obviously last week was Blitz Week, and there's a lot of stuff that has came down on there. And, rates obviously shot up. So that is a lot of what you're seeing right now. And what I want you guys to pay more attention to now, more than ever in years past, is when we're looking at everything that's going on current events wise, and then fuel prices have been elevated for a very long time. Don't be surprised if these rates stay up. I'm going to go as bold as saying through the 4th of July. Why do I say that? Because I already see people complaining how drivers are expecting the same rates this week as they got last week. That is probably going to happen. I will say with almost 100% certainty through Memorial Day. I wouldn't be surprised if you see elevated prices through the 4th of July. I think right now more than ever, this is a lot of things are leading into probably a lot of rebids out there with your contracts. If any of you guys are working off of RFP freight, if tender rejections continue to rise out there across the board, if their entire network is failing on it, they're going to probably spike a rebid or a mini bid in there to kind of weather this and gap this out. If you're in a truck in hand style pricing with your customers, like that pure spot market play, I think you're in a very, very strong position on a lot of the lanes that you're moving right now, because today's price isn't going to be tomorrow's price. And I want you guys to be aware of that. So if you're bidding on this lane in particular and your customer's fishing for a rate right now, they might have this load popping up. There's got to be some disclaimers on there. And if you've never had this conversation with your customer, I want you guys to call them in this instance and say, hey, we can provide you a price today, but that might not work the day of shipment, but here's why, right? Like there's a ton of data that's out there and you need to feed them this information, because I've already seen this, you guys. I've seen like a $300 to $400 swing on lanes that we move. We bid it out on a Tuesday to pick up on a Thursday. And now, we pad in with a lot of that stuff, and I move the freight no matter what. Like I don't ask for more money from my customer if I'm off. If I got to break even or lose some money, I'm going to do that to service the account. But there needs to be some disclaimers right now, specifically with what we're seeing, because these rates are probably going to be elevated here for a little bit. You can interject any lane that you see on here. The national average, you guys, I want you to throw that shit out the window. Do not pay attention to that at all right now. I want you to pay attention to a lane by lane breakdown that you're moving. Now, that is specifically to spot market style freight. If you're under contract with your customers, I'm assuming there's some conversations that are going on behind the scenes right now about adjusting pricing if it hasn't already. But with what we're seeing right now, you guys, truck in hand is going to be the play. Okay, what do I mean by that? The days of just post and praying and hoping that a truck becomes available are dead and gone. You got to actually work your capacity. Okay, you really do. And you got to present that capacity to your customers as it becomes available. So if I'm moving South Carolina to Waco, Texas right now in a dry van, and I've got carriers that have ran it for me, I'm calling all of those carriers. I'm trying to find out when they're going to be back out there in Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm presenting that option to my customer on a truck by truck basis. Okay. Try this out. This is what personally works for me. And it's worked for me in the past because I've seen this stuff happen before, you guys. All right. The rate is the rate. The person with the truck is ultimately going to win. And you need to learn how to work your capacity at a higher level besides posting and praying out there. But that is it for the dry van breakdown, you guys, on This Week in Freight, powered by my friends over at DAT. We see that curve heading up, and it might continue to rise here for the foreseeable future. I wouldn't expect it to drop anytime soon if I were you. But, again, if you guys want to jump in on this, email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com, and we will break it on down. But speaking of all of that fun stuff, how do you do all of this? How do you track your leads, and how do you sell, right? That's always one of the big things out there. So I'm going to bring on my friend, Mr. Josh Lyles, back on the show with our official CRM that we use inside of our company.
Let's go.
And Salesdash changed my opinion on CRM. And I tell Josh that every time because I probably shit on CRMs more than anybody.
You did. I watched the shows when you did. I used to watch them from afar. I'm like, one of these days we'll get them.
And you did. And, it's like, dude, it's one of those things where, when we were talking about it at TIA earlier this year, and I was on a panel, because like we're growing. And one of those key steps that we implemented into our business was like, we needed to track our leads because it still happens to this day. I'm never going to be too proud to admit, like, one of the biggest things is if we're not following up at the right time with our prospects, and so much just like sits in a CRM and never gets worked. And there's just so much opportunity that's out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's what a lot of people deal with. I think one of the top problems that we always see with most teams, we move teams over from all CRMs that are out there, and we move them over to Salesdash that are in the logistics space. And, when you get the data over and you're taking a look at like how many leads are in everybody's name, there's just way too much for people to manage. It's overwhelming for a lot of people. And then I think it's just one of those things where you don't really actually want to use the system.
Yeah.
So I think it's really smart to take a practice to actually start slimmer with the amount of leads that you're going after until you're in a really good follow-up method, because it is really easy to get focused on the lead gen. But I think for anybody that's a seasoned salesperson in logistics, that follow-ups are pretty much what rule everything else. If you're only getting to somebody once every month, it's probably going to, not say it's not going to happen, but it's going to be challenging in the grand scheme.
Yeah, dude, it is. It's like, man, I forget who I was talking about this with here recently on the show, but I'm like, you have to be a multi-caliber sales rep in today's environment, right? Like, you can't just have one method. You can't just call people or just DM them or email them. Like, you need to use a combination of everything. And, most importantly, you need to document that stuff because, for me, it's like, I'd like to do an every 2-week cadence with a lot of our prospects. And it's not, hey, I have trucks in your area. I try and provide a lot of market data, like overall market data. These are, this is going on during this week, fuel prices, blah, blah, blah. I try and put a lot of just like pertinent information to their operation. Now, I'm assuming most of my prospects probably delete the email right away, and that's fine. But they don't block me. So if they are reading it, hopefully they're getting value out of it, because that's really all I'm trying to position myself as. Because one thing I think that shocked me the most about everything that's going on in the market right now, and I know everybody's going to say they're killing it out there from a new business development. I'm shocked at how little the needle has moved from people wanting to talk to new providers at all with everything that's going on. And like I was saying on the market report, capacity is still plentiful. So like, again, there's no squeeze on trucks failing 3-4 days in a row that has happened yet, right? So as long as there's trucks in the market, and I think what we haven't seen yet is in a couple of months, we're going to see a ton of new authorities that have went out there, because now that rates are up, what happens? Drivers are going to leave fleets. They're going to go out and get their own authority, and they're going to try and move freight on their own. So I think like there's going to be even more trucks that are going to come in. And so I think it's like that supply and demand isn't maybe going to move in as drastic of a form as we've seen in the past. So like, that's one of those things that I'm seeing, because, again, most people aren't going to change providers until they feel pain, right? How many times do you have that conversation, Josh, when you're out there talking to your prospects? They're like, hey, I got a CRM. We're good.
Yeah. I mean, most people do. But we try to take an approach similar to you, right? Where it's just education. So, okay, cool. I know that you have a solution in place, and I think it's similar to freight brokers. They obviously have carriers, brokers that are in place and everything, but I think it's just more, how can you try to be educational? And ultimately, we work on a day-by-day basis to actually solve problems that, in particular, logistics sales reps, go through on a day-in and day-out basis. So we hear a lot of the same problems constantly, and all we can do is control is just the education of that. And, of course, like there's going to be, it's not going to be the thing that they want to just change day one when we reach out to them. So, for me, I think my mindset's always just a long-term approach. You just never know. Like sometimes it can be that day in that week. Sometimes you're lucky in that instance, but oftentimes if it's 6 months from now, if it's 12 months from now, 18 months from now, then, hey, at least all we can do is put ourselves in a position to control at least having a conversation, because we've at least, position enough relevant topics and messages and, stories or whatever it may be in front of them. But I always look at it too, man. It's like at some point, you would hope most teams at some point do talk about sales internally to say, well, what's working or what's not working. And in particular, you're going to go to your CRM because you want to see those things, and either you see activity or you don't. And that's the other thing too, is okay, great. Well, how can we make sure that we're positioning stuff so that way, if that stuff or those specific topics are coming up, that if that's something that's not great in their current solution today, that, we can make sure, okay, great, the education's been there, that we can actually help them out with that, because we know it's not good with the generic CRMs that are out there in comparison to, a more logistics specific CRM.
What do you think people get wrong about developing business? I have opinions about this, but I'd love to hear from you, right? Like you talk to people all day long, brokers across the board, transportation providers across the board. What is kind of like a common theme out there that most organizations are like, this is what we're missing?
I mean, I think going back to the leads thing, I think that's easily one of them in particular. I don't think people, I think everybody, like so many people just like, they try to play more of a volume game versus a quality game. Like I like one of the stories. So one of the brokerages that I went and visited last year that works with us, they have over 20 salespeople. And the sales rep that closed the most new shippers spoke up, in our session where all of us were talking together. And he's like, yeah, I closed the most shippers, but I didn't close the right shippers. Right. So, okay, cool. Those are wins and everything, but ultimately they weren't ones that moved enough volume. So for him, then he's now shifting towards, okay, I'm really focused on the quality. I really want to make sure I'm qualifying when it comes to understanding like the true volume play, whether it's just, hey, like their primary location, or do they have multiple different locations, or multiple different shipping managers, transportation managers that tender out freight. So yeah, I mean, I think that goes into play, but I mean, ultimately, like as a broker, you're providing a service. Like for us, we're providing, a product with software and everything. I always think it's just the long-term approaches more than anything else. And same thing, like education, but willing to play the long game. I feel, this is just my personal take, at least with like freight brokers in general, a lot of times I think it's just, okay, you're going to reach out to somebody and you're going to say that your service is the best, and that you can help them out. But at the same time, if you're a stranger, which you are, and you haven't had enough conversations with them, like if you were in their shoes, would you just trust handing over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of freight over to some stranger that you just met on call number one, and you don't even know what they look like or anything of that nature? So that was always like my mindset, I guess, when I was in brokerage, is how can you at least drive enough conversations to at least earn one opportunity to work to get into that? But I think a lot of people think that they just deserve it just because, right? Or, hey, I've just been doing this long enough. But okay, cool. If you haven't built enough rapport, and I think rapport is the main thing in particular, is that it just does require a number of follow-ups and whatnot. And the metric that I always go back to, so the last sales team that I managed in freight, it was a team of 8, and our top 30 customers, from this isn't from start to finish in terms of like, hey, lead got into the rep's name in the CRM and then we moved our first shipment, but it was actually from first contact, and I did all this manually, but from first contact with the DM to when they did move their first shipment was 81 days. In terms of actually being able to earn that opportunity. So sometimes it's faster. A lot of the times, honestly, it was beyond the 81 days. It could be over a year sometimes. But I think it's just building the rapport, and that it takes time. And I think a lot of people don't have the patience.
I mean, that's a phenomenal summary, Josh, because I'm, and that personally, man, that's something that I struggle with a lot, right? Like when I'm out there and I'm prospecting, like I'm not expecting anybody to give me their business on the first call or even really give me any time, right? And it's like, I don't go in there. My strategy is always like, hey, it's introductory. I want to like ask them something about their operation that isn't, hey, I have trucks. Can I quote your freight? Right. Because I think like that's the default that a lot of people like to get in
For sure.
on. And, I try and find out a little bit more about their operations, right? Like, hey, you manufacture this product. Are you going here with it or here with it? Is it this required at offloading or that required at offloading? And I try and just ask them something about that because like, I'm not naive to think that they don't have a quality group of brokers already inside of their operation or providers or carriers. I'm just trying to set myself up to like, hey, you think of me first, right? Like I want you to think of me first in the event your current network can't come through. And how do we put ourselves in that position to where it's like they look at us as a subject matter expert? And I think in today's environment, like there's so much access to information that it almost creates an even higher level of paralysis by analysis. And, I try and tell people like at the end of the day, who do you want to go after? Because if you just want to go after people who let you quote on freight, there are plenty of shippers out there where you can get added to a distribution list and you can be busy all day long bidding
with 50 other people on the CC list and all that stuff. Yep.
Exactly. But I look at it is it's like if I'm going to invest my time in prospecting and building a book of business, there's going to be some key parameters that have to follow up, i.e. scalable volume. All right. I want consistency inside of that. And that doesn't always come in the form of an RFP style shipper, but like, hey, I want to find somebody who moves like 4 to 10 daily shipments. Okay. Maybe they got a few facilities that are out there. They're primarily full truckload. I'm trying to do that process of elimination thing because I'm not like, can we do LTL? Yeah. Like at SPI where we're an agent, they have a phenomenal LTL platform built in that we can provide to our customers. But again, I don't want to sound like a generalist when I'm prospecting individuals out there. And I try and hone in on that. And it's like, with lead generation software, I think it's so hit or miss because you can put all the parameters in the world in there, right? Revenue, employee, product, whatever it is. And it could still feed you a bunch of bullshit leads at the end of the day.
Always. Yeah. Yeah. You can't always trust what it's going to feed you. And, but I do think it also starts too by actually just knowing what do your customers move, like products, commodities, and, can you go find some lookalikes and that stuff, because it makes it easier than to at least like find some kind of common ground. A lot of people when they start off, they'll use their just general location, right? So for you, it'd be Metro Phoenix. And like, that's the easiest place for you to start because you at least have some common ground. And then, okay, great. Well, if you've consistently moved a specific commodity or product, well, that's going to be the next thing for anybody across the US because you will know, hey, in these specific situations, these are challenges that carriers have or that other brokers have had, based on the other shippers that you work with that you could talk with them about, see if they run in different scenarios. And I think that that's a situation that puts you in a good spot, which I fully agree with you too, of you just want to think like, that's always a hard part, right? For the shippers is, okay, you get so many emails and so many calls a day, right? Sure, you got my information on file, but what have you actually done to say, well, you're going to be the first one pulled off the bench? And how have you positioned yourself to do that? Because typically like a just general email with a flyer or a website's probably not going to do all the justice because they've received so many of those. So it's challenging, but like, I mean, that's just the nature of the game too. It's just how it is. And you got to think creatively of how you put yourself in that position.
What do you think most sales managers get wrong when they're out there expecting from their teams? For me personally, I think that when you're just tracking the KPI of activities with no follow-up or no verification, like it's very easy for a sales rep to go in to any CRM or any phone system and make it look like they're actually doing stuff. But like, are you pulling that data? Are you verifying what's in the CRM? And, ultimately, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And I think a lot of people let stuff slide. So it's like, what are some of those things where it's like, you've seen success in people like, I don't want to say forcing accountability, but it's kind of the title of the show. How do you force accountability on your team?
I mean, I think with accountability at the end of the day, especially with sales reps in particular, like I would be curious for a sales rep, well, what do they think that they need to do to actually have success with their business? So if you wanted to onboard 2 shippers in a month, well, what do you think that actually takes for you to onboard 2 shippers in a month? I don't think it's on the managers to sit there and exactly tell them. I think the sales rep should be intelligent enough to sit there and say, well, I think I need to make X amount of calls, emails, and all this kind of stuff, take an omni-channel approach, right? And say, hey, I need to try all these avenues, calls, emails, LinkedIn, whatever it may be. But ultimately, I think I think where the manager sales rep disconnect is very often is it is the managers just saying, hey, you need to make 100 calls, but there's no rhyme and reason and logic behind like, why is that the specific number? And, where does that work? But I would also say at times too, and I've heard this from a multitude of different teams and also just from experience. I think if you're not like, number one, you obviously have to be aware of somebody's book and what they've actually been able to do. But I don't think everybody wants to just be told, hey, I have to do this. And you have to understand all the little wins that go into it. If you actually have a 10, 20-minute conversation with somebody, that's a big win, right? But if you're just glossing over that and just saying, well, you didn't hit your 50 calls or whatever it was today, but you actually had 5 really good connections, I would bet most people that you talk to, if they could just have 5 really good connections and 5 calls a day instead of, 75 left voicemails, no answers, or shut down by the gatekeeper, they'd probably take that all day, right? Because 5 connections over the course of a month is over, 100 unique ones. And then chances are you're probably going to have your chance at 2 shippers or however many that you're gunning for. So I think not discounting the actual connections, but what do those actually look like and sound like, and how are you maximizing on those? Because there's always some next steps. And of course, like you may not have gotten onboarded or closed that specific day, but okay, great. Well, what's the strategy? And this is where the managers, I think, got to come in terms of like how you're actually progressing, because the activities and everything are important, but it's like the nurturing and the follow-up and the strategy of the follow-up to say, great, I've had this conversation now, but what does the next one actually look like to continue to try to add value or position yourself as the next first person off the bench? Again, it's challenging. Not everybody has all the answers. All shippers are also very different, right. But I think that conversation is really important to be driving all the time.
I think like if most people actually understood, like say you got 500 leads, right? Arbitrary number. For you to actually whittle that down to a quality prospect list, right? Like hyper focused, hyper targeted, dude, it's going to take a couple of months to get through that, to actually have a real conversation with somebody or get some form of pertinent information out of them to actually see. Like, again, it's easy to go on and you look at Anheuser-Busch or InBev, for example. All right, yeah, they got a massive footprint out there. If you're going to start prospecting them, they're going to have some volume that comes along with it. But I think if you actually built up and be like, all right, process of elimination, who don't you want to go after? For me personally, there's a certain size shipper that can I move their freight? Of course I can move their freight. There's nothing out there that I couldn't do, but is it worth my time? Because like, do I have the financials to even afford to move their freight? Right. Because like it costs money to move some of these guys' freight, i.e. in the form of lines of credit and everything else. And then on top of it, there's a certain floor where it's like, hey, I don't want to go after stuff below this volume, right? Maybe if they have 2 full truckloads a week or a month or something like that, because that creates another environment that I've seen of that kind of that race to the bottom. Right. And it's like, I want to find that sweet spot of customers where I know it's like, hey, if I'm making 35 touches a day, whether that's a combination of DMs, emails, cold calls, whatever that looks like, they're the right 35 leads. And that's a big, big challenge and a big hurdle for a lot of individuals to go through, because it does take so much time to actually build that prospect list up. Yep.
It just takes time. But I mean, that's just the game. And I think that's what people have to lean into, right? Because I mean, I don't know. I think it's the easier it is, then you have to really question, is it even the right opportunity? I mean, you've been doing this way long enough, right? But if you did call somebody, and it's not to say every single time, because of course, like there's always unique special situations. Maybe you did call them at the right time where they've only got 4 carriers that they're working with, and those are they're just falling down today and it's not working. But most of the time, at least from my experience, I would say those that just let you in the door that early, that fast, they're willing to do it for everybody. But the ones that are harder to work into, they're just a lot more protective of who actually are the carriers that they choose to work with. And it does take time and everything. You probably will have more security long-term as well, because for the others that are calling in and trying to get onboarded with them, they're now going through that same experience that you had to go through for months or, over a year, however long it took.
Yeah, I think people also need to understand that developing business and growing business are 2 very different strategies, right? Because it's like to have that real hunter mentality where, for me personally, I get bored after we onboard, like after the kill's done, right? Like after we've onboarded and we've moved a couple of loads.
Yeah.
It's not that I get bored with moving freight, but like that excitement goes away. And it has a lot to do with the fact that like, all right, I did what I set my mind out to. Now, next challenge.
You love the hunt.
Yeah, no, and that's it, right? Like I love the hunt, and it's but once you get the business and grow it, it's a different thing, right? And that's, this is why a CRM is so vital, because it's like, hey, if you quoted somebody a handful of times, but you never followed up, you never asked for feedback, it's just another wasted opportunity that's out there, because again, they're not thinking about us, right? Like nobody's thinking about us at the level that we want to believe, right? Nobody is. Trust me. Your best friend isn't even thinking about you as much as you think that they're thinking about you. And it's one of those situations where it's like you need to leverage technology to stay present, right? And it's like you have to be patient in this approach, because if you onboard with somebody, you move a couple of shipments and you stop following up because you're like, oh, they love us, they're just going to keep giving us freight. They might, but unless you stay present, dude, they're going to go to the person who follows up with them every single week or whatever that looks like, because otherwise you're just another number to them.
Yep. Yeah. And I think the persistence in particular, I think there's always a huge debate on that. But the one thing I will say about persistence, because I mean, when I first got into brokerage, it was really interesting to be like, man, some of these guys really call them every single day. But I think the signal that it also tells the shipper, the person that's on the other side, is that you actually do want to work with them, right? You're putting in the effort and you truly do want to work with them. Like you're just not going away. Sometimes it literally gets to the point where you're like, all right, they're just not going away. Damn, here's something for you, and it just, and that happens. But yeah, I think how you use your systems is really important. I mean, you were talking about this on the lane analysis stuff, of having the truck in hand and, selling your capacity and whatnot. I think that's one of the things about Salesdash too, that we've tried to at least differentiate, because we try to make it to where when you are prospecting and you do learn about the lanes that a shipper runs, of course, that you have your open loads in your TMS and all that kind of stuff. But okay, great. Well, if there's not a good fit for that carrier, well, you could go take a look at your prospect base. And that's one of the best follow-ups that you can have, right? If it's somebody that's got a truck in a specific area and you get to now have a more strategic conversation with them, I think that's a really good way to lead too. Because ultimately you're going to have more prospect lanes, or, eventually a lot of data on that. And, it's just an easy way, or it's one of the better ways to actually follow up, instead of just like the typical random follow-up every now and then, just checking in and seeing what they got for the week and all that stuff. So I do think that that's a way that the CRM can be leveraged.
No, I mean, there's a trove of data inside of everybody's operation that they're not tracking. And, admittedly, that was something we weren't tracking at a level we should have internally with you guys, with Salesdash is, what business unit is that lead? Like I knew it, right? Because it's like, I'm the one who's reaching out to them all the time. But if I was gone, or heaven forbid something happens to me and somebody picks up where I left off, they're not going to know anything that I do, right? So it's like, even once you find out like, hey, what trailer type do they ship on? What are they food and bev? Is it machinery? Is it whatever industry it's involved in, volume, all of that stuff, track all of that information, because it's so pertinent to the overall account growth. And again, it was something that we were kind of falling short on, but I'll always be the first one to admit it. The hardest part about business for me, Josh, is systems development, because it takes so much work to go through to be like, hey, are we actually tracking what's legit? Do we even need this? And then furthermore, is this even working? And you won't know that for 3, 6, maybe 9 months of actually putting in the time to build that stuff out. And you got to make those adjustments.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I'm going to be very biased on CRMs in particular, but sales reps and, we're always going to work to try to figure out how we make data entry easier and whatnot. But I just think that from a mindset perspective, I think so many sales reps can flip their mindset to say, hey, if I do have these conversations and recording that information in a way that you can leverage it later on is important, because 3 months goes by and the majority of that information, probably over 80% of it, you're just going to forget. Right. And 3 months goes by really fast, I think, in this industry. And as the time goes by more and more, then 6 months goes by even faster. A year goes by. And so I think you're actually doing yourself a disservice by not recording that information, because you can't then eventually get back to them with all the details, continue to build on that conversation, because also nobody wants to cover the same information that they once did with you, right? I don't think that shows really good attention to detail and all that kind of stuff. But I would actually say we'll maximize those conversations that you had. Make sure you record it, because I think everybody should be thinking like there's a very good chance that you are going to forget the bulk of it, whether you actually want to pursue that account or not. But even in the situation where you don't, it's still going to allow you to focus, like you were saying, on the 35 that actually matter. At least you know these are the 35 and here's the reasons why. And then also for the ones where you come across them, you're like, I talked to them before, but I don't really remember. But if you don't have those notes and details of why you shouldn't, well, then eventually you're just going to, that time that you may have saved on the front end by not recording that information, it comes back one way or the other. So it's up to you.
Nah, dude, I love it. Josh, thank you so much for your time today. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you guys got going on?
You can go to our website, Salesdash CRM.com, if you want to learn more about a logistics specific CRM. And you can always connect with me on LinkedIn, Josh Lyles, anytime, shoot me a message. And always happy to chat about what we're doing and what we're working on. And if you ever wanted a free trial, we do a 14-day free trial.
No, dude, I love it. Josh, thank you so much. I will always vouch for Salesdash and Josh and the product that they put out there. It's what you need inside of your business, right? I don't say that often, you guys, but it's one of those pieces of technology that it is worth every dollar of investment inside of it, because it is truly the best CRM that I've ever seen, specifically inside of freight, and what it is on a granular level for your book of business and your prospecting. So hit him up, you guys. I will gladly talk to anybody about it.
Appreciate you.
As you see, Josh isn't sponsoring my show, you guys, at all. It isn't one of those things. And it's like, I'm being serious. If anybody wants to talk to me about it, please hit me up. I will gladly talk to you guys about what it's done for my operation. But as always, you guys, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank that show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.